This is a very timely conference, and I will be talking about food secure Arab world, enhancing crop and livestock productivity through science and technology. Now, certainly, we will talk first about the challenges, because this is what will affect our focus in the agriculture research. We know very well that the Arab world is, characterized by dry land, fragile agroecosystem, with physical water scarcity, with rapid natural resource degradation, groundwater depletion, drought, salinity, and more recently, what putting more pressure on us is climate change. The implications of climate change are very serious. Changes in precipitation and drought, as we will see in a little while, extreme temperatures, changes in climate zones, shorter growing season, and emerging diseases and insect pests. This is a very scary map. From this map, which gives the relative change of mean annual precipitation in the coming 100 years, this is the result of the average of 18 scenarios on climate change. You can tell that the Arab world is almost targeted with the less rainfall in the coming 100 years. We expect about 15 to 50% less rainfall in the coming 100 years. Now, of course, climate change affects not only food production, it affects all the 4 dimensions of food security: availability, access, stability, and utilization. Now, in addition, as you know, further challenges include inadequate agriculture policies for sustainable agriculture development, and this is again a timely conference for that, and insufficient investment in agriculture research and development. This is really reflects how important it is, the economic and political stability. And being in geopolitically volatile environment, you know that we have a problem in this part of the world where food security certainly is affected by the lack of security in many countries of the region. Now, all of these factors are very much interrelated, and they cause what we call a food insecurity trap. I'm not going to go through this, but clearly, you've seen this probably before. We depend a lot on food imports in the Arab world as a result of these constraints. And this is the more recent map, the 210 million metric tons of grain imported by the Arab world. You've seen the one for 2007, Nadeem showed the one, and Jane. But this is really shows, the previous figure, if you remember, was 58 million tons. This is now 65.8 million tons, which means in 3 years, we increased our imports by about 6.8 million tons. Look at Asia, which is probably 20 times more in population compared to our part of the world, and they import less. Now, this is another way to look at it. The Arab countries with high cereal imports dependency and large physical deficit, which are really most vulnerable at the macro level. Look at the, from your side, the right-hand lower square there, or rectangle. None of the Arab countries are least vulnerable. And therefore, we are either most vulnerable or dependent but physically sound, and then less dependent but physically strained. Now, if we look ahead for the 2030 picture on the cereal imports, we see this gap for the Near East and North Africa, which covers all the Arab world, is really, this gap is increasing by 2030 if we don't do much. And what's the implication of the food crisis in the Arab world? Countries are moving now more from self-reliance, which the World Bank advocated, to self-sufficiency. Whether this is right or wrong, of course, it's a big debate, but certainly self-sufficiency is a strategic issue, considering the fact that you have the 2 giants, India and China, and those may wipe everything in the market if they have food crisis. So even if you have the money, then you will not be able to purchase your food. Now, this, of course, so far paints a gloomy picture, but there are many pathways towards food security in the Arab world. And if we look at the sources of increase of food production, 70% will come from agriculture intensification. This is according to FAO. 20% will come from cropping intensity. A good example is Egypt, where we have almost 2 crops per year, and only 10% comes from increased arable land, and in the Arab world, it is only Sudan that has more arable land. All the others are strained, as we will see. Now, a study on country topography indicated that we can increase food security either by bridging the yield gap or by increasing land under agriculture. And when we look at the different types of country topography, we have type 1, which you have little land available for expansion with low yield gap. Type 2, suitable land available for expansion with low yield gap. And little land, type 3, little land available for expansion with high yield gap. And suitable land available for expansion with high yield gap. Where we are in the Arab world, we are really in type 3, where we have little land available for expansion with high yield gap. And if we look at the land availability globally, you can see only Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa have substantial land. As a matter of fact, 90% of the land available is available only in 7 countries of the world. And therefore, if we look at the Middle East and North Africa, we have about 3 million hectares, which is not really much, as you know. Therefore, we have to go for bridging the yield gap in our part of the world. And what to do, how to do that? Certainly, we have to go for agriculture intensification. But as you all know, if we intensify agriculture in a non-sustainable way, it will be a great threat to environment. Therefore, we have to go for sustainable agriculture intensification for production systems, and consequently, we have to go for agriculture modernization. Now, there are major yield gap issues. I'm not to go through in details, but these are related to the efficiency of technology transfer, because we have many technologies in the shelf that did not find their way to the farmers. Proper targeting of varieties and production zones, timely availability of inputs, and then government intervention and policies. And as a matter of fact, the strong political will and support is on the top of this agenda. Now, for bridging the yield gap, we need to go for science-based technology change, which is key for causing agriculture to undergo a transition from traditional to modernized agriculture. And in the Arab world, we cannot feed the Arab world with the traditional agriculture. The challenge in the dry areas, or in the Arab world in particular, is how to produce more with less and adapt advances in science and technology. Now, there are 3 components that we have to invest in. The first one is on natural resource management and inputs. The second is the crop and livestock genetic improvement. And the third, which is very important, the socioeconomic and policy and institutional support. And the challenge is how to integrate the output from these 3 major pillars that support sustainable agriculture development. Now, I will come to ICARDA experience in the application of science and technology enhancing food security. And ICARDA, as some of you know, I'm sure, it is a member of the consultative group for international agriculture research, for which IFPRI and the World Fish Center belong. And ICARDA has 4 research programs, one related to biodiversity and crop genetic improvement, integrated water and land management, sustainable intensification of production system, social, economic, and policy research. Our geographical mandate covers the non-tropical dry areas, but our focus is on Central and West Asia and North Africa, which covers all the Arab countries. Let me use the example of crop genetic improvement and how it really contributes to enhancing food security. We at ICARDA have a large gene bank of germplasm with desirable traits for all the major crops and wild relatives that we are mandated to work on. Of course, wheat, as you know, is a major one, food legumes, barley, and forage crops. These are collected from all over the world, particularly from dry areas, and through conventional plant breeding and biotechnological tools, we have developed over years in cooperation with national programs about 880 varieties Most of them, of course, have been released in developing countries. These varieties, they have high yield potential, desirable agronomic traits, tolerance to abiotic stresses, and resistance and tolerance to biotic stresses. Most of these varieties, as you can see, have been released in the Arab world, but of course in other parts of the world as well. Now let me use one example on science and technology, and this is the synthetic wheat, which is developed through the crossing wild relatives of wheat with our domestic wheat. The beauty of these synthetics, they produce high yield with excessive drought, and they also are tolerant to diseases. This is only in 208 yield, where we had in northern Syria 210 millimeters, which is very low rainfall. Even those synthetics gave 1.5 tons per hectare. These same synthetics, they can really give you as much as 11 tons per hectare if you have more favorable conditions with supplemental irrigation. Even with the 320 millimeters, they can give you as much as 3.5 or 3.7 tons per hectare. With 1 or 2 irrigations, you can go as much as 6 tons per hectare. Over years, the collaboration with our host country, Syria, contributed to enhancing their food security in wheat. Syria in the 70s and the 80s were importing wheat, and in the late 90s and the early 2000s, Syria in good years was exporting 1 to 2 million tons of wheat. Of course, in 2008 we had the worst drought, but the beauty of these new varieties is that they can make more productivity per unit of water. And if we look at why Syria managed to reach self-sufficiency in wheat and even export in good years, is because of 3 factors. One is the new varieties with high potential, second, supplemental irrigation, and third, timely input, and certainly the government policy in terms of enhancing and supporting agriculture was the big dynamo behind that. Now, the other example that I want to show you is one project. ICARDA implements about 200 projects related to food security. This is one recent project that we have supported by, I will talk about the donors, but this to enhance food security in the Arab world, more particularly the wheat production in the Arab world. And I want to say why wheat? Because the Arab world is the largest consumer of wheat. The per capita consumption of wheat in the Arab world is 180 kilograms per person per year, and countries like Morocco and Syria, they consume even 235 kilograms per person per year. So you can tell the value of wheat to food security in the Arab world. This project is supported by the Arab Fund for Economic and Social Development, the Kuwaiti Fund for Arab Economic Development, the Islamic Development Bank, and the OPEC Fund. We have 7 countries involved: Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, Syria, Sudan, Tunisia, and Algeria and Iraq are newly now joining through OFID grant, and we expect other countries to join, particularly Yemen, once things are really permissible to start the project. This is a first phase for 3 years. It involves not only scientists, but farmers, and farmer field schools is a very important aspect, extension staff, and most important, the policy decision makers. I will give just the glimpses of the results of the first year. This is in Egypt, where we are taking the Sharia governorate to increase the productivity at the whole governorate, and the productivity last season was increased 1.2 tons per hectare, or 18%, with 25 savings in water consumption. This is in the Qayrawan in Tunisia, with increases from 20 to 40% over farmers' varieties. This is all bridging the yield gap. And this is in Syria under rain-fed conditions, where the increases with 220 millimeters were 10 to 20%, and with supplemental irrigation, we were talking about increases of 15 to 40%. Another example of what genetics can do is moving chickpea from a spring crop to winter crop to get more water by incorporating cold tolerance as well as resistance to a serious disease called ascochyta blight. Now let me come to other aspects of science and technology, and this is incorporating resistance to major insect pests. This is the example of the Hishane fly in Morocco. Actually, this is the Moroccan work in collaboration with IFPRI. The Hishane fly resistance is the difference between a crop and no crop. Another example is the yellow rust, which was serious not last season, the season before, if you remember. And I want to mention that some farmers lost up to 40% of their crop. Of course, we do have resistant varieties, and 3 of those are now being released in West Asia. Now, another important aspect to enhance crop productivity is really to talk about water management. Water research is very important at the basin level, at the national level, at the farm level, and at the field level. Now, we have what we call water benchmark sites. This is supported by the Arab Fund, IFAD, and OFID. And we have that in 3 agroecologies: rain-fed agriculture led by Morocco, irrigated agriculture led by Egypt, and marginal land led by Yemen. There are really many technologies that were developed through this collaboration, and I'm not going to go through these, but these are really turning desert areas into productive areas. This is the take-home message. The other example is the integrated crop livestock integrated production systems. This is so important in marginal lands, and we are talking here about 3 components: the natural resources from cropland to rangeland to animal genetic resources, to the whole production system, and then to the policy environment and markets. This is a value chain aspect that is very important in terms of research on rangeland and ecology, as forage system research, feeding systems, genetic resources characterization, breeding programs, value addition, market research, and crop rangeland livestock integration. This is a project that's supported in IFAD, started in West Asia, moved to North Africa, then moved to Central Asia, to Pakistan, and to Latin America. It has various technologies that enhance the income and the productivity in pastoral areas. This is the research on rangeland. This is cactus, which we really imported from Latin America, spineless cactus, where in Tunisia now it's grown on vast areas as a source of fodder, as a source of fruit that is exported to Europe, and as a source of some red dye and cosmetic and medicinal uses. It's amazing. This has been desert areas before. Of course, there is also an issue on carbon sequestration. Another aspect that we did is indigenous breeds of small ruminants were characterized with respect to their adaptation to climate change, and many breeds, including the Awasid breed, is known to be well adapted to climate change. Now, many technologies came out of the work on the livestock, feed blocks, improved rams, early weaning, improved barley cultivars, as well as rotations with forage legumes. The value addition is so important to enhance the income of farmers, including yogurt and cheese making at the farmer level. Even in Pakistan, we are talking about really mohair production. Now, this is the new CGIAR program on integrated and sustainable agriculture system for improved food and food security and livelihoods in the dry areas. This is a big project with major objectives of enhancing the productivity of dry lands. And we have several, I would say, centers working with IFPRI, as well as national programs and regional and international associations. There are 5 regions here: West Africa and the dry savannas, Eastern, Southern Africa, North Africa, and West Asia, where the Arab countries are there, Central Asia, South Asia, as well as other partners, other work with Latin America, which is not mentioned here. There are really target impacts that we are after, and there will be a special meeting for West Asia and North Africa to talk more about this project with all the stakeholders invited in order to put priorities on how to proceed further. Now, in conclusion, what can make the difference to enhance Arab food security? The first one is enabling policy, environment, and political support, investment in science and technology and research, investment in agriculture development, sustainable intensification of production systems, extension and effective technology transfer mechanism, capacity development and institutional support, innovative partnership and networking. These challenges facing dry areas are far beyond the capacity of any one institution or any one country to address, and therefore partnership is very important, and that's why such conferences should be an excellent opportunity to develop partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you.